Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Kelly. I am the program coordinator over at the Rochester Hills Public Library, and I want to welcome all of you to today's presentation in association and in collaboration with Ascension Providence Rochester, Know Your Why, a nutrition talk with registered dietitian Sarah McAuliffe. Before we get started, I'd just like to say that our next program is coming up this week. It's on this Thursday, January 20th. It's a Smart Towns program, Augmented Reality, What is it all about? With Dr. Khalid Mirza, founding director of Oakland University's Augmented Reality Center, which is coming up again this Thursday, January 20th. If you want to register for that, you can do so at calendar.rhpl.org. Tonight's Zoom program, and we thank you all for being gracious enough to come along to the Zoom program. I know it changed a little like last minute, but we're very grateful you were all able to join us. And the program throughout tonight's program, the audience will remain muted on Zoom. We will have a question and answer portion after the presentation portion of tonight's program. And during that portion, you guys can feel free to leave any and all questions in the chat box, which I'll leave a message just so everybody can see where it is. And I will, act as a moderator, and I will present those questions to our presenter. With all of that, one last note. We are recording tonight's program. That should be available in about 1 week's time. So around next Tuesday on the library's YouTube page. And it should also be on the library's website shortly thereafter. And with all of that said, I will go ahead and pass things off to our speaker tonight. Please welcome our presenter, Sarah McAuliffe. Sarah, take it away.
Thanks, Joe. And I am just going to say thank you to all of you for dedicating a little bit of your evening to share with me. I have been a dietitian for approximately 15 years or so, and I absolutely love what I do. Most of my time at work is spent talking to people about treating and adjusting their lifestyles to treat diabetes. But another portion of what I do is talking a lot about healthy eating and learning how we can prevent the development of diabetes. So one of the things that just really drives me is helping people find their passion and find their own ways to achieve the best health that they can. So if you're anything like me, you might recognize that the title of this program, Know Your Why for Healthy Eating, is more than just about nutrition facts. I often find when I'm working with people that we know or we have an inkling of some of the things that we should be doing, but sometimes we lack the motivation to be consistent with the things that we want to see ourselves doing. So you're going to find that this talk is a little bit more of a workshop than just me talking to you. So I'm actually going to ask you to do some of your own thinking. I know, darn, right? We have to think for ourselves a little bit, but to do a little bit of your own thinking and try to figure out some of the motivators and some of the steps that you can change to help recognize and get to your own ideal health. So our objectives of this presentation are to help you identify why you might want to eat a little bit healthier, to recognize the science behind the dietary guidelines, why we say what we say about what we should be eating. We want to identify how well you're already doing with meeting some of those guidelines. And then we also want to be practical with ourselves. So I want to help you find some manageable ways to help improve some of your eating habits as well. I've mentioned we all need motivators. I'm a big person for motivational quotes. So I just picked a couple to get us warmed up and get our brains started that I really enjoy. The first one on the left there, one day or day one, you decide. So the power of positive thinking and setting our minds in a good space to make helpful decisions is super important. I also like this quote that you see on the right. I've never met a strong person with an easy past. So some of those things that challenge us the most get us prepared for the things that we're going to be successful with. I want you, before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this talk, I want you to think a little bit about some key areas that are identified as the wheel of life. So the wheel of life is just a way to kind of categorize things that are important in our life. And those categories are health, friends and family, significant other, personal growth, fun and leisure, home environment, career, and money. And basically what I'm asking you to do here as we look at each of these categories is just spend a couple of seconds rating from 0 to 10, how satisfied or maybe how happy you are with each of these categories. 10 would be very satisfied or fully satisfied, and 1 would be very dissatisfied. So you can redraw the circle if you'd like to and label it, or you can simply just write down those categories. And next to those categories, write 1 to 10 with how satisfied are you within each of these categories. And again, I'm just going to read them one more time. Health, friends and family, significant other, personal growth, fun and leisure, home environment, career, and money. So I'm hoping you've had just a minute or two to kind of rate from 0 to 10 or 1 to 10 in each of those areas. But one of the things I want you to think about as well is, is there more than one area that your current health is keeping from a higher rating? So for example, maybe you've rated your health a 7, but if your health were more along a 10, you might be more apt to do more social things and help with personal growth and fun and leisure, or maybe advance your career. So just think about, is your health impacting more than just the health score? Is it impacting other areas? So keep that in your back pocket. We're going to come back to that idea. But I wanted to go through the dietary guidelines. And every 5 years, the dietary guidelines for Americans are updated to reflect updates in science. So as we get more research in the area of nutrition, we update those guidelines to reflect what we've learned over those past 5 years. So dietary guidelines have been in place since 1980, and they really look at trying to bring good quality of nutrition to everybody, no matter the race, ethnicity, economic circumstances, or health status, that everyone can benefit by shifting some food and beverage choices to better support overall health. So they've been around a little while. We know that our food choices directly impact a variety of different health conditions. So the first one that we probably all think about is our weight, right? Our food choices directly impact overweight and obesity. Our food choices also have a direct relationship with cardiovascular diseases, which are the number one leading cause of death in the United States. So we're talking about coronary artery disease, hypertension, which is blood pressure issues, high cholesterol, and stroke. We also know that food impacts development of diabetes. And as of this year, 10% of Americans have diabetes. 35% have prediabetes. So they're not yet diabetes. They don't yet have diabetes, but their blood sugar numbers are elevated beyond normal ranges. And 48% of those over the age of 65 have prediabetes. So what we're gathering here in that diabetes category is that a lot of Americans have either diabetes are at an increased risk for the development of diabetes in the next 5 to 10 years. We also know that food impacts cancer risk. In particular, we know that food has a direct relationship with breast cancer and cancers of the digestive tract. So we think about esophageal, stomach cancers, intestinal cancers, colon cancers, all being somewhat attributable to food. And then we know food has a big impact on bone health and muscle strength. It's approximately 20% of older adults that have reduced muscle strength for their age. And that impacts really quality of life when you think about it too. When we start to lose muscle strength, we lose that ability to be independent, to do the things that kind of keep us happy. So the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans were released in 2020. So we're midway in this cycle. We'll get some new information in about 2025. So one of the things that I wanted to show you as well is these dietary guidelines may strike some of you as being pretty simplistic, and they are, but the graph that we're looking at in front of us shows basically the average American's compliance towards the dietary guidelines. So this is on a scale of 100. So 100 being the best and 0 being the worst. And we're seeing years. So we see 2005 through 2016. And you can see over that 10-year range, we're really not getting any better. If your math is like my math, when I was in school, 59% was still failing, right? So we're not doing that great with following these guidelines. So this is really a good opportunity for you to figure out where you are doing well and where you have some opportunity to improve. As we go through these different categories, in front of you here, I have an example food frequency questionnaire, but I'm going to go through each category within the dietary guidelines. And what I would ask you to do as a part of this workshop is really just think, as we're talking about each subject, of how you're doing in that category. So if you've got a little piece of paper handy or notes that you're taking on your phone, that's a good opportunity as we go through these categories to kind of rate yourself with how you're doing here. So our first category that we're going to look at are vegetables. And I think we all know we should be eating vegetables. Vegetables are good for us, but why? So the why here, we know vegetables are one of the most nutrient dense foods that are out there. So they're rich in vitamins and minerals. They're low in calories. Science tells us that eating high intakes of vegetables may help to lower blood pressure, can help to lower cholesterol. It can aid with weight loss, keep our bowels moving, and also serves a big protective role in the prevention of cancer. So in this category here, we see that each day, the guideline says we should get about 2.5 servings of vegetable each day. And a serving, think about this, your fist, the full fist is about 1 cup for most people. Men, you've got a bigger fist, so you're probably closer to 1.5 cups or so. But when we're talking about servings of vegetables, we're talking about 1 cup raw or a 1/2 cup cooked. So when we cook it, it condenses, so that serving gets a little bit smaller. So think about that. Do you get 2.5 cups approximately, or 2.5 servings worth of vegetables each day? And then you can see on this graph here, the different subgroups of those vegetables. So are you getting 1.5 cups of dark green vegetables each week? Are you getting 5.5 cups of red and orange vegetables each week? Do you get 1.5 cups of beans, peas, or lentils each week? 5 servings or 5 cups worth of starchy veggies like potatoes or sweet potatoes or corn or other miscellaneous vegetables, at least 4 cups per week. Our next group that we're looking at here are fruits. And much like vegetables, most of us know that fruits are something healthy for us to eat. But again, we see with fruits, because they're rich in antioxidants and phytonutrients, they serve a big role in the prevention of cancer. They may also help to lower blood pressure by serving in as a rich source of potassium. They promote heart health because of the fiber content that they have, and again, are another good food to incorporate more frequently if you're working on weight loss. So again, the guideline says 2 cups per day, approximately, of fruits. And that cup, again, could be your fist. So think a cup of berries, 1/2 of a banana would be one of those servings. A small apple would be one of those servings. So how are you doing with your fruits? Do you get 2 cups each day? Our next category that we're looking at are grains. The science research says most Americans get plenty of grains or carbohydrate foods, so things like bread, cooked grains like pasta, rice, quinoa, barley, tortillas, English muffins, pretzels, and snack foods. A lot of those are grain-based foods. And we're shooting for about 6 ounces a day for most Americans. So let me just show you how quickly this adds up. So if most people have approximately 6 servings of grains that we're trying to use per day, and you have a sandwich, The bottom slice is 1 serving, the top slice is 2 servings. So that's 2 of your 6 in that one sandwich. And we haven't talked about breakfast, dinner, or snacks yet. So you can see really quickly that some of those servings add up. With cooked grains, a 1/3 cup. So a 1/3 of your fist would be 1 ounce equivalent. So if you had just a cup of pasta, that's 3 of those 6 grain servings per day. So they add up quickly. We need them. They give us good nutrition, but they certainly add up pretty quickly for us. Another interesting fact here is, most of us get too many grains, but 98% of Americans don't get enough whole grains. And we know that whole grains give us the best nutrition. I've got the next slide here that we're going to look at in a little bit more detail about what's up with these whole grains and why are they so important. But we know whole grains give us a good source of fiber. They help keep our bowels moving. They might help prevent certain types of cancer, particularly colon cancer. Fiber from those whole grains help to keep us feeling full. And they provide nutrients like B vitamins and iron as well. So this picture, I think, does a really nice job of explaining why that whole grain is so important. So when we're talking about whole grains, we're thinking about the 3 main grain parts: the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. So the bran is where most of the fiber and B vitamins live. The germ is where we get some protein, some vitamins, and some healthy fats. And then the endosperm is kind of the starchy part that doesn't contain as much or as dense of vitamins and minerals. So when these grains get refined or processed, generally what happens is they're removing the bran, they're removing the germ, and what we're left with is kind of this white endosperm part of the grain. And as a result of that, a lot of the key nutrients go with it. Now, food manufacturers got into the habit of doing this because it extended the shelf life of some of these grains. So instead of that grain product going bad in a month or two, if they refined it and just left that endosperm, now it can last for several years on the shelf. So less work for them. But I like this graph. It shows us what happens to the nutrition here. So what we're seeing in green is 100% of the nutrients when we're looking at whole wheat. So you can see we've got 100% of the vitamin E, the B6, magnesium, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, fiber, potassium, iron, folate, and protein. So we've got 100% of all of those good nutrients for us. Now, the red little bar that you're seeing is what's left over when we've refined or processed that wheat flour. So you can see all of those nutrients go down to 25% or 1/3 of kind of that natural content, that natural nutritional quality of the whole grain. So then in white, you might be thinking, well, what's the whole deal when I see enriched wheat flour on my label? What happens there? Well, that's food manufacturers kind of using a spray vitamin or mineral to add back some of those vitamins and minerals that might have been lost in that process. But you can see by the yellow, this is the enriched flour. We get back the thiamine, the riboflavin, the niacin, those B vitamins. We get back a little iron and the folate. But what we don't get back are things like fiber, potassium. We don't get all of the protein back. So they're trying to replicate what was originally there before we went through that whole processing system. So you can see here, I like this. It really shows you there's a lot of good benefits to eating more whole grains rather than the highly processed refined ones. As you're looking at your ingredient labels, how do you know if you're getting a whole grain? I'm going to give you 2 quick little cheats here to know if you're getting whole grains or not. The first one is you can check that ingredient label, and the word whole is super important. So you should see whole grain or whole wheat as the first ingredient for those grain products. So things like breads, crackers, tortillas, wraps, those sort of things. Pancakes, if you do those occasionally, waffles, English muffins, those are all examples of grains, pasta. And what you're looking for there in that first ingredient is the word whole. You might see some products that say whole grain, but the word whole grain wheat is 5 items down. That means there's a little bit in there, but because the ingredients are listed in terms of highest by weight to lowest by weight, if you're seeing the word whole grain lower on that ingredient list, it's less likely to be making up a significant portion of the food item. If you're looking at a label, let's look at this. Particularly, we're talking about whole grains here. So I'm focusing on carbs and fiber because we're talking about whole grains, because we know that about 98% of Americans don't get enough whole grains. I'm spending a little extra time on this. So when we're looking at nutrition labels, the first thing we want to look at is number one, is the serving size. In this example, it shows us that that serving size is 2/3 of a cup. Everything else on this label reflects if we eat 2/3 of a cup of this particular item. So now we're going to slide down, servings per container can be tricky. That's just telling us if we ate the whole thing, we'd be eating 8 of these 2/3 cup servings. So sometimes you buy something and you look at it and you think, oh, this is a perfect little snack for me. And then you flip it over and it says serving size is 2 tablespoons and there are 20 in the package. And you go, oh, I guess I better invite some friends over. So just be careful with that. But I like to look at the total carbohydrate, particularly when we're looking at grains. And here you can see the example says 37 grams of carbohydrate. For folks who might be really working to lower blood sugars, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per meal is usually a decent starting place. Per meal, not per day. Again, we're just talking about a decent starting place if you want to kind of keep an eye on what's going on with your carbs. But under that, you see things like fiber, sugars, and added sugars. Those are all already included in that total carbohydrate count. But when we're trying to determine if something is a whole grain or not, the general rule of thumb would be if it's got at least 3 grams of fiber per serving, chances are it's a whole grain. If it's got less than those 3 grams and it's a grain product, chances are it's more refined or it's a processed grain. So that's one thing you might think about doing. As we're talking, if you get tired of listening to my voice or after the talk is over, peek in your pantry, look at some of those grain products, look at your pastas, your breads, your crackers. Do they have at least 3 grams of fiber per serving as a good little indicator of, is this a whole grain? Or look at that ingredient list and you're looking for the word whole along with wheat or grain as that first ingredient. All right, moving into our next dietary guideline category, we're talking about protein. We don't need oodles and oodles of protein in our day-to-day. Approximately 5.5 ounces is the recommendation within the dietary guideline. And we know that most Americans get plenty of protein, but we tend not to get some of the healthier subgroups here. So let's think about this. If 5.5 ounces per day is what we're supposed to be getting as our base, 1 slice of cheese would be 1 ounce of those 5.5 ounces. A 1/4 cup of nuts would serve as 1 of those ounces. A 1/2 cup of legumes. So if you're thinking about chickpeas, or black beans, kidney beans, those kinds of things, that 1/2 cup of those would serve as about 1 ounce of that 5.5 goal. A deck of card size portion of something like turkey, chicken, fish, pork, or beef is approximately 3 of those 5.5 ounces that we're shooting for each day. And again, some of the healthier subgroups would be things like seafood. Most Americans don't get enough seafood in each week. So here they're saying 8 ounces per week might be a good thing to strive for. And then some of those, plant-based proteins as an alternative. So nuts, seeds, soy products, things like that. So let's see here. Science has shown us pretty consistently that things like processed meats, so lunch meats, hot dogs, and red meat, so beef, pork, and lamb, do increase our risk of cancers of the digestive tract. So again, if you have a strong family history of esophageal, stomach, colon cancer, that might be something that you really want to pay attention to, the frequency that you're eating red meats or lunch meats and hot dogs and things like that. We know that those plant-based proteins tend to be friendlier for environment, provide a good source of protein, and can help with managing conditions like heart disease, cancer risk, weight, because they provide that protein along with a lot of antioxidants and fiber as well. All right, next category. I hope you've assessed your protein intake each day as we talked about those different categories. We're moving on to calcium-rich foods. So again, the guideline here is still 3 cups equivalent per day. So example serving sizes here might be a slice of cheese. 1 cheese stick would serve as one of those 3 servings per day. 6 ounces of yogurt or 8 ounces of milk or milk alternatives. So if you're wondering about like almond or soy or oat or all those different kind of plant-based milks, those are usually fortified with vitamin D and calcium. So those generally serve a good serving in this diet, this dairy category as well. And we know most Americans don't get enough calcium-rich foods. And not getting enough calcium over a long period of time can contribute to osteoporosis as we get older. One category, this is not in the dietary guidelines, but I love reading about probiotics and the gut microbiota. So I like to add this in as a new category to think about if it's something you haven't thought about before. We're talking about naturally fermented foods. So probiotics are the living organisms that might benefit us as humans. Prebiotics tend to serve as the food for those good, healthy bacteria within our gut. So keep in mind, in our intestinal tract, there's a war happening all of the time, the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria. So we want to try to set up our eating habits to promote a good living environment for those good bacteria. So how do we do that? Well, first, we've got to get them in there, right? So naturally, when we're born, we generally have good microbiota. And then throughout the course of our lives, because of stress, inactivity, being overweight, frequent antibiotic use, those are some of the things that can influence our natural gut bacteria in a negative way. So things that we can do, including more naturally fermented foods, can be really beneficial in the long term. So we're starting to see research that says those microbiota play a role in our digestion and bowel regularity, in our immune system health. And they're also starting to see some studies where they're linking, things like anxiety and depression to a non-ideal gut balance of those probiotics within our intestinal tract. So we're going to keep learning a lot more about these probiotics. But how do we get these probiotics into our diet day to day? So most people are familiar with yogurt. My comment there would be, if you are choosing yogurt, try to choose some that don't have a lot of added sugars. Kefir milk is a cultured milk-based product. That can be another way to get some probiotics in through food. Kombucha, a fermented tea-based product, is another source. And uncanned sauerkraut or pickles. So once it goes through that high temperature canning process, we lose those good bacteria. So that's why there's a note here that's saying it's uncanned sauerkraut or pickles. And I noticed a lot of grocery stores now actually have a special section that says fermented foods. It's refrigerated where you can find uncanned sauerkraut and all kinds of goodies back there too. So rule of thumb here, try to include a source of these every day, but try to blend up the different types of sources of these fermented foods that you include. So if you only eat yogurt, maybe try an ounce or 2 of kombucha a couple times a week. Or if you only do kombucha, maybe try an ounce or 2 of kefir milk once or twice per week. So just trying to get some variety in with those different sources can be helpful too. All right, our next category, fats and oils. So the dietary guideline here is 27 grams per day. So I've done the math for you, and there's roughly 5 grams in a teaspoon of oil. So 5 teaspoons of oil or less per day is the requirement for fat. We know that the healthier fats tend to be plant-based, and saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So most plant fats are liquid at room temperature. Think avocado oil or olive oil. Saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So think about butter, bacon, mayo, the fat that you'd find in whole milk, the skin on poultry, the marbling in meats, those are all examples of saturated fats. So we know saturated fats can increase our blood cholesterol levels. So that's why we're thinking about those, whereas those plant fats may be beneficial or neutral to things like cholesterol. 77% of Americans eat too much saturated fat. So most of us are getting kind of the wrong blends of fats here. We could do more with the plant-based fats and less of the saturated fats, which contribute to heart disease and stroke. I don't know if you're curious, but I sure was thinking, well, where do we get these saturated fats from? So I found this information on the Dietary Guidelines, and 19% of the saturated fats come from sandwiches. So 20% from other sources, which we don't know, but the biggest category that we could follow here was sandwiches. And think about that. What might be those saturated fats on sandwiches? Well, if they're including something like a burger as a sandwich, well, sure, the red meat in the burger would have lots of saturated fat. They're going to put some bacon on it, which would have saturated fat. There's going to be cheese on it, which would have saturated fat. So that sort of makes sense when we think about it from that perspective. The second leading category here, desserts and sweet snacks, which I think some of us would have thought about when we said, where do these saturated fats come from? All right. So just another little opportunity for you to think a little bit more for yourself. And to just answer these, I've got 5 questions here for you to think about. But we went through those different dietary guideline categories. And I asked you as we went through each category to kind of rate yourself of how am I doing within each of these categories and subgroups. So now that you've gone through that, what is the most important healthy eating goal to you? Is there something you've been thinking about doing a little bit differently with your eating? So take a second. I would encourage you, if you have something to write it down with, to jot that on your piece of paper, put it in the notes section on your phone if you've got your phone handy. What is the most important healthy eating goal for you? That second question, we went through those guidelines. How healthy would you rate your current eating style? Food tends to be very personal, doesn't it? Someone wants to mess with our food, we tend to get mad. So how healthy is the way that you like to eat? On a scale of 0 to 10, what would you rate your healthy eating factor? Everybody said a 10. Everybody's perfect. I love it. But what keeps you from eating healthy? For those of us who didn't say we're a 10 on a 10 scale with healthy eating, what are some of those barriers? What gets in the way? And then thinking back to that wheel of life, or those different categories that can provide us with some level of happiness. And we said, is your health impacting more than one area? If you improved your eating, if you improved your health, would some of those other areas get better? So how important is it to improve your health? Are you pretty satisfied with where your health is at? Or could some changes, whether big or small, really be impactful in your day-to-day life? And then that last question, what would the benefits be to making some of these changes you've been thinking about? So if you've said one of your goals is maybe eating more vegetables, what would the benefits be to you? And I'd encourage you, even after we're done with the talk and workshop today, to expand upon those benefits. We know through research that the more you think about the benefits, the more you write down the benefits of any change that you're thinking about making, the more likely it is to increase your commitment to that change. So it seems silly every day waking up and going, well, I want to exercise more, without thinking about why, right? What are the benefits? We can should all over ourselves, but until we can say what those benefits would be, whether it's small or big, we're kind of stuck in that same motion. So write down those benefits, whether it's food or something else that you're working on. All right, I've got this really quick little video. I think it's about 3 minutes long that I think is just super cute to help you starting to think about getting different ideas for eating healthier.
What can you make your family for dinner that's healthy and tastes good? You can follow the plate method. This healthy eating plan works for everybody, including people with diabetes. Indeed, making nutritious, healthy meals will be a snap. What's a healthy plate? It's a way to control your serving sizes where you don't have to count. Simply use a 7-inch plate for children and a 9-inch plate for adults. First, divide the plate in half and fill one of them with vegetables. There are 2 types of vegetables: starchy, like potatoes, corn, peas, or plantains, and non-starchy, like zucchini, jicama, cucumbers, carrots, or salad. If you have diabetes, fill half your plate with non-starchy vegetables. Then fill 1/4 with whole grains or starches like brown rice, corn, beans, or whole wheat pasta. In the other quarter, add some lean protein like tofu, grilled fish, or chicken. What about adding a side of tortilla or bread? It's hard to resist, I know! The trick is serve yourself a smaller portion of the other starches on your plate instead. To complete your meal, add a drink like unsweetened coffee, tea, or a glass of milk. But remember that drinking 8 ounces of milk affects your blood sugar just as it would if you ate another tortilla or a slice of bread. Or you can also choose water with a squeeze of lemon or lime. How you create your plate is up to you. You have many options, as long as you remember to follow these healthy guidelines. And ta-da! You're all set! You might be thinking, how can you use the plate method to make vegetable beef soup or other meals? Simply follow the same idea. Fill your pot with low-sodium broth and lots of healthy vegetables like corn, cabbage, zucchini, carrots, and onions. And some lean beef, but not too much. Just like you'd put on 1/4 of your plate for each person you're serving. If you want, add your favorite type of bread on the side. And you've got the right amount for a healthy meal. Enjoy!
She's a peppy little pepper, isn't she? Oh, I won't make you watch it twice, I promise. But hopefully that got you thinking a little bit more creatively about some different ways that we can do this. So if you found as we went through those guidelines that maybe you're a little bit low on some of the healthier stuff like vegetables, here are some different strategies that you might be able to try to increase your intake of vegetables. So adding more vegetables to a favorite recipe. So maybe you have a family stew or soup or casserole or something that you like to make. And often you can double up or sometimes even triple up with soups and things on some of those non-starchy veggies like celery and onion and carrots. You can add vegetables to your sandwich or wrap at lunch. You can add extra vegetables to your soup. Use something like cauliflower rice to do half and half with regular rice to get some extra servings of vegetables in there. Add some extra vegetables to your pasta. That works well in my family when we're boiling the water for the noodles, and you've got those going to throw in a bag of frozen broccoli, cauliflower, carrot blends, and things like that, just to get some of those vegetables in there. Cut up vegetables for easy access in your refrigerator. Try a new method of cooking veggies. A lot of people say they don't like vegetables or they're not vegetable people. I hear that a lot. And I think vegetables are one of those things that are just as important as brushing your teeth, right? We brush our teeth twice a day, every day, because we want the benefits of clean teeth and healthy gums and fresh breath. But it may not be your favorite thing. So vegetables can be like that too. You know, get them in, they fill you up, they give you good nutrition, but maybe it's not your favorite thing at the meal. Or maybe you try roasting vegetables and find, hey, that brings out the sweetness and I enjoy eating them a little bit more like this. At work, just bringing vegetables to have on hand. If you have access to a refrigerator, leaving a bag of, chopped veggies or carrots or something like that in there can be helpful. Packing your lunch. doubling up on vegetable servings at meals. So 2 at lunch, 2 at dinner, and you're 4 vegetables in already. If you're eating out or carrying in, you can ask your server if you can choose vegetables for a side dish, or even sometimes swap a starch like a potato for something like tomatoes or steamed vegetables. Enjoying a side salad with lunch or dinner, add a bag of microwavable frozen veggies to leftovers to complete the meal another day, rather than picking at it on our plate. If you are maybe not getting enough fruits in, can you start earlier in the day? Maybe add fruit to your morning meal or add some vegetables. Morning vegetables, I find for people tend to be tricky, but you could do something like grape tomatoes, sliced tomatoes. Some people like eggplant kind of sauteed instead of a piece of toast. So there's some options if you want to get creative. Shredded carrots to oatmeal can be a good thing to kind of throw in there. Sounds strange, but generally works pretty well. Not hiding the fruit. So a lot of us put our fruit like in the crisper drawer in the refrigerator, and then we forget it's in there, and then it goes bad, and then we're mad that we've wasted money on fruit that we didn't eat. So putting that fruit maybe in a more central location, or cutting it up and putting it somewhere when you open the fridge that you can see. Keep in mind, frozen tends to be a great option for both vegetables and fruits. So if the season isn't great, you can get some frozen berries and eat them frozen like my kids like to do, or heat them up in the microwave and eat them warm and kind of savory. At meal times, maybe plan what vegetable you're going to have with the meal rather than thinking about the protein first. So are there certain vegetables that you really like to eat that if you have them there, you're less likely to overdo some of the other portions? After a meal, many of us grew up having maybe dessert or something sweet after the meal, so we don't feel satisfied until we get that sweet something at the end of the meal. And that can be a really nice place to try a piece of fruit instead of other kind of sweet treats and things like that. If you are like 98% of the American population that doesn't get enough whole grains, keep in mind some examples of those whole grains can be oats, if they're whole, brown rice, barley, bulgur, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, whole wheat. And often people say, well, I don't want to spend all day at the grocery store looking for these whole grains. So my suggestion is usually we'll start in your pantry, kind of look at some of the options that you've got there and figure out 1 or 2 things. Maybe you want to find a different tortilla or wrap that has more fiber in it. Start there at the store. If you don't like the taste of whole grain bread, or maybe you have a sensitivity to it, there's lots of different wraps and things like that that can serve that purpose too. I find for some people who don't like whole grain bread, they don't mind doing a higher fiber wrap just because the texture and taste are a little bit different already. All right. If you are assessing your intake and you think, well, maybe I'm doing too many fatty meats or too much red meat, could you plan a meatless meal once or twice a week? And for a lot of people, starting with a meatless meal at lunch can be a really good place, because you could throw garbanzo beans or kidney beans or something like that as your protein source on top of a salad. You could try a bean-based chili. Could be hummus and veggies. That can be a nice kind of lighter place to start with some of those plant-based proteins. If you are leaning up your meats, try to choose meat options that have 3 grams of fat per ounce or less. So if you're looking at a 3-ounce portion, a nice lean meat would be considered under 9 grams of fat in a 3-ounce portion. So things like turkey breast or chicken breast tend to be a good option, or the ground versions of each of those. And then removing skin on poultry before you cook it is another option for ways to lean that up a little bit. How can we reduce the less healthy stuff? So we talked about ways that we want to maybe try to increase the healthier stuff, but what are some of the options for reducing some of the less healthy stuff? Those saturated fats, again, those are the fats, saturated fats and trans fats are the ones we're trying to avoid to help protect our heart and to lower cholesterol. So replacing butter or margarine with olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil can be a good option. Trying some of the newer nitrate and nitrate-free turkey bacons instead of original pork bacon. skip the mayo or try non-fat plain Greek yogurt where you would make like salads. So if you're doing a chicken salad, egg salad, turkey salad, that plain Greek yogurt works well, or as the substitute for something like sour cream. You could try plant-based milks instead of whole milk or 2% cow's milk, just to reduce the saturated fat. And then, of course, grilling, broiling, baking are better cooking options that help to get rid of some of those saturated fats versus something like deep frying, which adds more to it. If you are trying to reduce sodium, maybe you have high blood pressure or you have a history of kidney stones and you want to reduce your sodium, just some real quick tips here, looking for fresh or frozen vegetables rather than the canned ones, looking for reduced sodium condiments. Ketchup, barbecue sauce, steak sauce are notorious for being high in salt and sugar, and sometimes surprises people. They say, I don't add salt to anything, but they put, a quarter cup of ketchup on everything they eat, which adds a lot of that salt to it. So look for the reduced sodium or reduced sugar options, or just be conscious to use less. And a lot of people are drinking sports drinks and things like that. Really trying to eliminate those as a way to reduce sodium too. Electrolytes contain sodium, chloride, potassium. So if you're somebody that's watching your blood pressure or has a history of kidney stones, those electrolyte drinks probably aren't the best option for you. Again, my name is Sarah McAuliffe, and I'm one of the dietitians and diabetes educators at the Diabetes and Nutrition Counseling Center. I work for Ascension Providence Rochester. We are now, we moved about a year ago, so we're in the outpatient medical building at Squirrel and University in Auburn Hills. We're right across from Oakland University. We do a variety of different services. So one of the things that we do are healthy eating consultations. So people might come and meet with me or one of my colleagues to talk about individual ways that they could eat healthier, lose weight, improve their blood pressure, improve their cholesterol. So those are a variety of things that we do kind of under that healthy eating consultation. If that's something that interests you, you can register for that at healthcare.ascension.org/events and then search for healthy eating. We also do a diabetes prevention program. So that program is intended for people who've been told by their doctor that they have prediabetes, or for those who are at high risk of developing diabetes. So if you are over the age of 60, if you have some weight you could lose, if you have a family history of type 2 diabetes, those are all indicators that you may be at high risk for developing diabetes. If you're sedentary, if you don't get at least 150 minutes per week of physical activity, this could be a program for you. And again, you're going to find that at healthcare.ascension.org/events and search diabetes prevention. That is a year-long program that we offer for free. Our next class is going to be starting in April. And we're hoping, if things go well, that'll be an in-person program at the OPC in Rochester. A lot of what we do is diabetes education. So we work with people individually to better understand diabetes and how their food choices and lifestyle choices impact their blood sugars. So a lot of that is done one-on-one, but we do offer group classes as well. And that, if you need some help getting started, you're welcome to give us a call here at 248-844-4530. And one of the newer things that we offer as a part of our diabetes education is professional continuous glucose monitoring. So we are able, with your doctor's permission, to set you up for 7 to 10 days worth of continuous glucose monitoring if you have diabetes, to identify blood sugar trends and where we might have the biggest impact through lifestyle. Otherwise, that is all that I had planned for the program tonight. So Joe, if there are any questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer a few of those.
Excellent. I'm going to leave a little message here so everyone can see where the chat is. We haven't gotten any questions just yet, but everyone, please feel free to ask any questions you have for our speaker tonight in the chat box below. And while people are thinking of any questions or writing them down, you gave a great bit of advice at the end of just common problems you see people have, or simple areas where you can just make improvements, like with the plant-based milk, cutting down on saturated fats. I know when a lot of people talk about their difficulties with, being more nutritious, like why can't I improve my diet? A lot of people, one of the big complaints they have is they just, they don't have the time. And I was curious if you have any common tips for people who struggle to find time to like better improve their diet, things that they can do at least as a stepping stone, that it's like, if you're on a crunch for time, here's some simple steps you can take that aren't going to require a lot of dedicated time, and you can squeeze into your like already busy schedule. Like it'll kind of work with you without dedicating too much time from you.
Sure, Joe. I think that's a comment that I hear from a lot of people, that, we've already got so much on our plate. I just don't have time to do what I want to do with this. So we get stuck in the same patterns over and over again of carry out or eating fast food and things that we know aren't the most nutritious for us. So things that I find are helpful for that, sometimes it might just mean, spend a few minutes creating a healthy breakfast and lunch that you're just going to do every day. That works really well for me. I don't care if I have a lot of variety from day to day, but I like to see that I've got good balance at each meal. So some of my coworkers always tease me because a lot of times it's, one of those bag salads with a little tuna pouch thing, a piece of fruit and a few olives, and that's lunch, right? But I've got that balance there. I've got my protein. I can, kind of pour it all in there. I can leave that bag in the fridge and then pull it out as I need it. So I think just buying things that lend themselves to being quick and grabbable can be really smart as time savers. So don't feel like every day has to be a new masterpiece of, creative cooking, because sometimes that's not practical. So if you find a few things that really work and repeating those, as long as those have good balance, that makes sense. I can't say it enough, but like frozen fruits, frozen veggies are a really good time saver. They're not going to go bad. Those little, 99-cent steamable veggies, things like that can be thrown on with just about any meal. So that can be a really helpful tool. Including protein at breakfast is another just strategy I find helpful that helps to keep people feeling more satisfied. Or if you're somebody that is really trying to better manage blood sugars, that protein in the morning really seems to be important. So maybe it's something like you buy the already hard-boiled eggs, or you buy, low-fat cottage cheese that you're going to throw on an English muffin, or you're going to do a whole grain English muffin with peanut butter on it. But, set yourself up for success with some of those kind of quick convenience things that are still full of nutrition ahead of time.
Excellent. And we have a question here. One of the first ones that kind of came up was, so we have this kind of like info on screen already here, but they say, what is the best way to contact you or get in touch with you?
So, the best contact is, on this website here. Our phone number is a good way to reach us. And then if you're looking for some of our programs and things, I'll back up here. Healthcare.ascension.org/events. And then there's that healthy eating option. So basically that's, you pay out of pocket to meet one-on-one with a registered dietitian like myself, or to find out about our upcoming classes, programs, events. You can go to that website as well. Or the phone number to reach our office too.
Excellent. And, if you're interested in contacting everybody, feel free to write that information down. Our next question comes from Patty, and they ask, how does someone ease a sweet tooth? And I will add just, what kind of steps or little tips can you give for people that say they really struggle with the sweet tooth?
So no one's going to like my response, my first response, but I'll come up with more. My first response when people bring this question up to me is usually eat less sweets, right? And in sweets or sugar tend to be a learned behavior, just like salt is. So many of us kind of have that experience, maybe more with salt, where maybe you don't use a lot of salt and then you taste something really salty and you put it in your mouth and you're like, whoa, that's so salty. That's gross. I couldn't possibly eat it. Because you've kind of trained your body to a certain level of saltiness to taste right or to taste normal, but your body doesn't need that, right? And sugar works in much of the same way. So if you're somebody that really has a lot of sweet cravings, could you, even if it's just for a day or a meal that you're going to work on, leave the environment where you normally get that sweet tooth craving. So if you're normally getting that sweet tooth craving sitting in front of the TV, watching TV at nighttime, could you get yourself out of that environment where you would normally eat that sweet thing and go somewhere where you wouldn't normally eat? Maybe a bedroom. Maybe you read a book while you're laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep. Maybe you go outside for a few minutes and catch some fresh air. Part of that is kind of a behavioral, I'm training myself to eat this sweet thing. So every time I do step A followed by step B, I want that sweet thing. It's not a physiological need. It's kind of trained behavior. Or it could be, that's the responses that nobody wants to hear. Like, oh, eat less sweet stuff. That's yuck. What a bad answer. The other solutions there could be try to replace that processed sweet thing with something more naturally occurring. So like I talked about in the presentation, maybe doing frozen blueberries as a sweet something that you could do when you normally would reach for chocolate or candy or something like that, can be a good alternative. For some people, chewing like sugar-free gum can be a good deterrent to help curb that sweet tooth. Dark chocolate for some people, that bitter taste can help. Some people find eating something bitter when they're craving sweet actually knocks it out. So some people say, I'm really craving chocolate, but I had a pickle and then I didn't feel like I needed it anymore. So sometimes it just takes a little exploration of what works and giving yourself the opportunity to create a new behavior that maybe isn't associated with eating that sweet stuff.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Do you have any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? Give it just a second to see if that comes in. Not seeing any other questions. We can see if anybody asks anything in a moment, but while we do that, is there anything you'd like to say kind of as a final note to sort of wrap up here with us tonight?
Thanks, Joe. I wasn't expecting that, but I would say keep an open mind. And that's part of this talk is, what is your why? Try to think about what is in it for you to make changes with your lifestyle. And whether it's food or activity or managing stress or getting more sleep, I think you really have to spend some time thinking about the benefits and then creating some kind of plan, right? So if you've got benefits there, if that's real to you and it's meaningful to you, then create a plan. If the plan doesn't work, do something different with it. So many of us sit in the same plan of, well, I do this and I do this and I do this, that we don't see some of the other things that might have a good impact. So if what you're doing is working perfectly, keep doing it. If it's not, try something different. And that may mean sometimes reaching out for support with someone like me or my colleagues or other resources that can kind of give you some new ideas if you're stuck.
Awesome. I think that building that great foundation, I think, is going to be a very powerful tool for a lot of us. And I think that's a really nice thing to take away from our presentation here. And we can end off with one final question that just came in from Joyce. And I'm sure you get this one a lot. I'm sure it's one a lot of people have a hard time with. What do you do about wine?
Well, again, wine in moderation may not be the biggest concern that you have to chase around. Keeping in mind, moderate drinking for most adults is 1 drink per day for women and up to 2 drinks per day for men. So a 5-ounce glass of wine, 5 ounces is pretty small when you pour it in that glass, is within the recommendations for dietary guidelines.
And if you're somebody that needs to get rid of the wine for whatever reason, you're having a hard time with that, what do you think is a pretty good way to kind of ease yourself out of that, or like something you can kind of supplement to help you back off from that?
I would say similar response to my response with sweets, right? If you're really feeling like, okay, I've got too much alcohol coming in after the holidays and things like that, think about the environments where you would normally do it. So maybe when you're getting started, you don't go in that environment where you would normally have your glass of wine or whatever it might be. You could replace it with something like tea or water, or lemon water, or sparkling water or something like that that might serve that point as well.
Excellent. All right, that was great. And I think we don't have any more questions. So I think with that, we will go ahead and call it a night. And before we go, I'll just say thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're really glad we could still make this happen and everybody here was able to be a part of it. And we thank you all so much for your time. And a big thank you to Rochester Ascension Providence. And of course, a big thank you to Sarah for joining us tonight. Thank you guys all so much and have a great night.
Thanks for your time.
Bye, everybody.